When surfing through Pinterest, Instagram, or any other social media platform, it's easy to feel like every artist out there is better than you. The term for this feeling is called imposter syndrome, and it often feels like an unscalable mountain. Every time you improve, the peak just seems to grow further and further away, giving the illusion that the people ahead of you are far out of reach, but at the same time, gives the illusion that the people behind you are well on their way to surpass you, which is exactly why it's common for artists to feel like frauds. First of all, let me ask you a question. Have you ever compared yourself to a better artist? How about one that's worse? If so, there's a good chance you may have lost confidence when comparing yourself to someone better, but gained confidence when comparing yourselves to someone worse. This is social comparison theory, and there's many studies showing this pattern. But there are some patterns that suggest the self-esteem from upward social comparison and downward social comparison to be net negative. Would this be the case for art? I mean, it's not the same as regular social media with pictures of people, wealth, or social status. Except it is. Sort of. First of all, there's the quantitative variables, like how many likes or views an artwork has, but there's something else that art has, which is the context, or the lack thereof. Art is one of those mediums where the final result is more important than the process of a piece. This means that any of the practice, bad sketches, references, tools, post-processing, or filters used are usually not shown. And in that sense, it's no different from people on social media. Only the best parts are shown, and only the best artworks are published. But that's not all. Artists can be cleverly deceptive when it comes to covering up their flaws and highlighting their strengths. There is said to be 6 fundamentals of art, those being anatomy, perspective, form, value, color, and composition. Most artists tend to excel in one fundamental while having a decent foundation for the rest. So when you see an artwork that excels at a fundamental that you are not proficient in, there's a good chance you perceive them as a better artist, because you will compare your perspective stats to their perspective stats. Even though in context, you may have a higher overall understanding of the fundamentals. This may be why even beginner artists can seem closer to an amateur if you compare the highest stats. But what happens if you compare yourself to someone who is better? Obviously their stats will be much greater than yours, but I think there's one extra variable that increases this perception, and it is your uncertainty. AKA that feeling you get when you see someone so good, you ask yourself, how did they do that? Where do I even begin to get to that level? This uncertainty increases the perception of a greater gap. This is known as ambiguity aversion. Here's a simple experiment. This is Bob. Bob is a beginner, and he asks you, how long will it take for me to become as good as you? You can give a pretty confident answer by telling Bob how long you've been drawing for and what you've studied to get there, but try to answer the same question for how long it will take you to become as good as someone that's better. Now the question seems almost impossible to confidently answer, but why would uncertainty be perceived as a greater challenge? Well, there's a study in 1961 that showed just this, where participants were shown 2 urns. Urn A explicitly had 50 red balls and 50 blue balls. Urn B had 100 balls, but the ratio of red and blue was unknown. The participants then had to bet on which urn to draw from and which color would be drawn. The results showed that participants drew from Urn A much more than Urn B. This is why uncertainty is seen as a greater risk or a greater challenge. So to summarize, the combination of social comparison, lack of context, strength comparison, and ambiguity aversion may tell us why it's common for artists to feel like frauds.